Hey everyone, here to do another short fiction review. This time I'm going to take a look at the much talked about book from Richard Powers, The Overstory. This has gotten a lot of hype, doesn't really need any hype for me. Won the Pulitzer, it's gotten a lot of recognition, but I wanted to feature it because I just finished it recently and wow, it had quite an impact. Just like my previous fiction review, I'm going to talk about the premise a little bit, some themes, and offer some final thoughts. Keep it pretty straightforward. So the premise of the Overstory is difficult to capture, as are the themes succinctly. But essentially, this book is a collection of 8 separate but interconnected stories of people, and the through line between each of these stories is the role of trees. Which, when you explain that to someone, that you get a lot of quizzical looks and maybe head scratching, and you think, so trees? How does that work? And I have to acknowledge that I kind of had that reaction to this concept when I first heard it. Like, how could a book be about people but really be about trees? But that's what the Overstory is. Um, the whole first kind of act of the book is really just tells 8 almost totally separate stories of these people. And then the rest of the book eventually shows some of their interconnections. But trees are a through line through the whole thing. Um, yeah, I don't want to say much more than that because I want to. Part of the joy I think of reading this book is discovering the role of how Richard Powers wrote trees into this, and discovering how these connections kind of organically unfold. It's really a joyful, a wonderful experience of reading. So I think I'll leave the premise at that, as interesting or maybe vague as that is. And I want to comment on some of the themes. Now, this is a pretty meaty book. It's about 500 pages. It's a thick novel, and it's a pretty dense read as well. And so there are a lot of themes that one could talk about here. I'm not going to exhaust all the themes, but I do want to talk about 4 briefly that I noticed that I want to comment on these mostly because I want to intrigue people. So first, this might be pretty obvious, but there's a theme of environmentalism through the book. The questions of what impact do humans have on the environment, and how do we kind of think about the ethics of the way that we think about or don't think about our environment, the place in which we find ourselves. What impact do we have, and particularly what impact do we have on well, trees are the obvious one, but what impact do we have on kind of the invisible members of our environment that are around us that we don't notice regularly, that we don't take time to appreciate? What's our impact on them? And so, yeah, there's a strong theme of environmentalism. Some people might be worried about that. Might think it's kind of a preachy or heavy-handed, and I would argue it's not. I really don't. I think it's deftly handled. I think it's very sensitively handled. It's well done. It's not an environmental screed just kind of thinly cloaked in a story. It's really not that. So rest assured, if you have that reaction to an environmental kind of approach to storytelling, this is not like that. Um, Second theme is interconnectedness. This might also be obvious, but I mean, in the structure of the novel gets at this theme in itself by the fact that there are these interconnected people and stories, but also our interconnections with our environment, with trees in particular. There's a lot of layers of exploring the interconnected nature of our lives, which I love that theme in novels in general. I love David Mitchell when some of his work like Cloud Atlas and the Bone Clocks and stuff, like he does really well at that, in my opinion. So I tend to love that kind of storytelling, and Richard Powers just knocks that out of the park here. The way he teases at interconnections is just really well done. This is, you can probably tell this is going to turn a little bit into a gush fest. I really was kind of bowled over by this book, but interconnectedness is the second major theme. The third theme is, I struggled with what terms to use here, but I think the third theme is something about human arrogance or human hubris. Um, and not just in an over the top arrogant sense, but more the hubris of kind of just not thinking about our impact, really. He really gets at that in a powerful way in terms of exploring how people and organizations, businesses, companies, things like that, um, can almost have an arrogant way about themselves in the world. But interestingly, he's not afraid to comment or to um, get at some of how arrogance infects our environmental efforts as well, which is one of the reasons I think the environmentalism theme is handled so well in this book, is because human hubris affects everything we do. Even our well-intentioned efforts to correct other hubris is infected by its own hubris and its own arrogance. And the stories in here bring that out masterfully, I think. So I found myself reflecting on the nature of human arrogance a lot as I was reading this book. How might this impact my own way that I navigate the world? So that's the third theme I would notice. And then the fourth and final theme I want to comment on is simply the power of story. I mean, the term, the overstory, which, by the way, is itself a forest term. It refers to the kind of top layer of the forest. The understory is the bottom layer. But the theme of story is really strong in this, and it's almost a little meta in that sense. But one of the quotes, a quote that gets repeated a few times in the book is that the best arguments in the world won't change a person's mind. The only thing that can do that is a good story. And that quote plays a role in some of the stories in the book, but you can tell it's almost kind of the role that he's hoping the book plays itself, is that a good story will change our minds about how we think about our role in this world and our impact on our environment. And I want to give a few final thoughts. I already tipped my hand to this, but this is a gorgeous novel. Again, it doesn't need praise from me. It's gotten a ton of praise already, but if anyone watches this video, this channel, and decides to pick this up as a result, I really would feel like that's a win, because I think this is a book a lot of people should read, particularly if you're a fiction reader already. I mean, this is a no-brainer to pick up, but the themes are handled well. It's structured well in terms of the interconnected stories. That's not an easy thing to pull off, and you have to be a master of the craft to do that, and clearly Richard Powers has accomplished that here. And also just the sentence-to-sentence, paragraph-to-paragraph writing is really beautiful. There are so many pages and sequences that really captured me in just the beauty of his use of words. And also, again, a gush fest, right? Also, the actual stories are gripping stories. The portraits of people that he paints are really engrossing, and the story beats and some of the turns that the stories take are genuinely emotionally arresting. Man, I just thought this was an incredible book. One of the better novels I've read in a long time. Well worth your energy if you have any interest in reading the Overstory. I want to end this review with another quote that gets at the power of story in general, and one of my favorite quotes from the book. In a conversation some of the characters have, one of them asks the question, "What do all good stories do?" The response that he gives is, "They kill you a little. They turn you into something you weren't." And I love that notion about story, and the Overstory itself accomplished that in my life. It impacted me. I've been walking around my neighborhood looking at trees in a different way, and even considering my own role in the world in a different way, and I'm so thankful for this book and for Richard Powers for writing it. So this gets some of the highest praise for me for a work of fiction in a long time. Read the Overstory. You won't regret it. It will impact you one way or another. See you for my next review.